Money is the root of all evils when it comes to uprooting relationships.
It's a big red flag if someone in their 50s has not managed money well.
I can't afford to take on his bad money habits.
Do you ever see girls taking advantage of men financially?
She said, let's go test drive cars. That would be fun. I've always had my eye on this car.
It does sound fun.
Yeah, and it's
also
fun,
sounds like a setup to me, but go
well,
ahead.
Yeah, see, you're smarter than I am, Debbie.
Hi, it's Debbie and Caitlyn back for another episode of Dating at Her Age. Today we're talking money and getting into a relationship with a man who may be broke and what problems that may pose for us as we get deeper and deeper into those relationships. And I think it's going to look a lot different for somebody at my age, at 57, than it is for somebody at your age, Caitlyn, because I have a lot less runway to retirement. Mm-hmm. So if I get involved with a man who is really bad with money, maybe he's been through bankruptcy court more than once or twice, maybe he owes the IRS a lot of money, that could really set me back. And I've been working 35, 40 years to get to this point in my life. You're 29, so you probably have your own set of questions about this.
Yeah, I feel like we're still establishing things in our 20s, late 30s, you're getting a little bit closer, but it's just confusing to know like who actually is serious and could make changes about their money, who's still figuring it out, and to have sympathy for that, and when I should just cut it off and move on and know that I'm getting into a bad situation.
Shane Stewart, certified financial planner with DMBA in Salt Lake City, Utah, joining us in studio for the conversation. Hi, Shane.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.
I think we should start with Caitlyn because she's got some really valid questions for somebody her age. And I've also dated at her age. I think I could probably relate to a lot of the concerns that she has. So Caitlyn, you're up first.
Well, basically, I feel like I'm still struggling financially, but
Sure.
I'm trying my best.
Right.
And so we people my age are conflicted with, saving their money and investing and doing all that, but also not understanding it, but also wanting to live their lives. And I think my biggest question overall is just, how do you know are there warning signs that if you're getting involved with someone, if they are on the right path, or red flags that they're not going to change? Like what are some sticklers that would just come to mind to you if you're meeting someone and they're consistently not there for you financially and not even there for themselves? Like, how do you know if they're going to change at that age?
Yeah, good question. And I think you correctly identified, at age 29, 30, you're still figuring things out. So you can give them a little bit of grace, right? You can say, okay, maybe you're just still working on things. Spending patterns, big issue. If they appear to have more money than or think they're already making, it's probably going on the credit card. You need to pay attention to that. So spending patterns would be one. I would say also just their relationship with money. You can listen for cues when they say things about money. You can bring up the topic of money without saying, how much do you make and are you a good spender? You can't really always say that, but you could say things like, what's your philosophy on spending? How do you do that? And just really share and find out where they are without getting into the detail of their own personal situation. And the cues you want to look for are things like a long-term view of their success in money. That's a great sign. If they have a long-term view, they may say, yeah, and I'm even struggling a little bit right now, but I have a goal.
Right.
And you can even look at them when they're not about money, but other things. Do they have goals that they're setting? Are they trying to accomplish things? If they're not, they're probably treating their money that way as well, not trying to set goals, not trying to manage it well.
How early, that someone, do you think that conversation's appropriate to get up? Is that like 3 months after knowing someone? What do you? What would you just speaking as a human?
It might not be second dates, right?
Right.
It might not be second date. I would say if you have been dating for more than a couple of months, it's okay to have that conversation. And you could really do it in a non-threatening way, like I mentioned, where it's rather than, how do you manage your finances? You can say, we did a story the other day, or I read an article the other day about this. What do you think about this financial issue? And try to root out some of their philosophy about finances.
Yeah. And after a couple of months, you can kind of get a feel for what you guys have been doing together and who's been paying for what. We just had a conversation about who pays for the first date and pays for how do you split dates up in general. And so I guess that is a good perspective to give it a few months. I don't want to scare anybody away and be like, how do you spend your money?
Right. You don't want to start on first date.
I want to be sympathetic as well.
Give me a statement of for your finances.
Right.
Yeah.
I promised you that I've had every single dating experience along the way. And when you said, like, what are the red flags? And you said, like, are they putting it on a credit card? And you can watch their spending patterns. One of the first men when I was younger than Caitlyn that I'd gotten into a serious relationship with, probably toward the tail end of when I was in college, really seemed to have his financial act together. On top of that, he was 5 years older than me. So I thought, he's well on his way to financial success. He drove a really nice car. And we're talking in the 80s when nobody drove a nice car at my age. He drove a really nice car. He had a great job. Told me he was making $50,000 to $60,000 a year. And he didn't work very far from the convenience store. He worked in an office complex there that I worked for. So I knew he had a job, and we would meet for lunch often. He was always paying the bills, Shane. And Caitlyn, I think this is a real lesson, is that I dated this man for 2 years thinking, and I wasn't in it for the money. I was on my own way to have my own career in television news. It wasn't that at all, but he had been playing me with that. Turns out that he had a really bad credit card habit. Yeah. And I was very naive to that kind of stuff. I was just a college student, trying to pay for my books and my bills. And turns out that eventually he started using my credit card, the one credit card I had. And I ended up paying on that credit card because we broke up.
Right.
For years, Shane, I had to take a second job. I was already a television news reporter, and then I had to take a second job doing morning radio drive.
Yeah.
And then I would go into my job as a TV news reporter after that, and I took that second job just to pay off that credit card bill. And by the way, the interest rate was crazy. It was like 20% back in the day. So that speaks volumes to what you were saying, is they may look like they've got their act together, but everywhere they go, they're like yelling, charge it, put it on the credit card.
Yeah. And you have to pay attention to that to say, wow, they appear to have it really together, so much so they're driving an expensive car. And
I wasn't paying attention to that.
Really, that's very rare for a 20-year-old.
It's all for show.
Yeah, it's all for show. And the easiest thing to do in life is to look rich.
Yeah.
It is really easy to look rich. So that's why it's difficult to decipher what kind of financial situation they're in. But you're right. You should try to pay attention. And we can learn from your experience that paying attention to, wow, they have a really nice car. You have to stop and ask yourself, why do they have a really nice car? Why are they really making that kind of money? And it's tough to decipher.
Or are they drowning in debt?
Right.
I think I'm worried too about people at your age, Caitlyn, don't always have their career path figured out. What's been your experience with that?
It just depends. Like, I feel like I'm starting to see people in my life grow up more at 30. Yeah. I think that's a benchmark for some reason. I've noticed, I think I'm speaking more about my guy friends. I just see them start to settle down and get on a path and whatnot. But like for me, I think I'm lucky to have known what I wanted to do early on, and I just kind of did it. And I'm lucky that I was blessed with my job, but I'm very understanding that it's taken other people a long time to figure that out. So I guess that actually kind of brings up another question. If you're seeing somebody kind of jump from job to job and not seeing that consistently, I don't know, how do you confront that? Like if say you met them in January, they got a new job in November, maybe, I don't know. And then in August, they're ready to move on to another one because they're bored. I don't know. That it affects money.
Is that a flag to you? Is that a flag to you?
If Caitlyn? I've known them long enough to know the pattern, because sometimes things just happen. Yeah, a little bit, because it's not stable to me.
Do you think that should be a red flag, Shane?
I think so. I think if you know, like you said, enough about the pattern, if you've had conversations that you pick up on, wow, you've worked at a lot of places, or in that short period of time you've been together, they've worked in a lot of places. I think it is a red flag. If you've been together for long enough to ask this question, 6 months or more, you might say, what is your career goal? what's your plan?
Yeah.
I think that's okay to say without being too intimidating. They might take it as, well, why are you asking? Or, are we getting that serious? But really, I think it's just more of a casual conversation. Share your career goals and then say, what are yours? And if they can't come up with a good answer, that's a big red flag.
In all honesty, that's one of my first date type questions. Not like, what's your career goal, but what do you do? What are you interested in? And it's not like I'm getting super
That's
deep
natural.
on a first date, but it's one of the first things I ask because my job is a big part of my life. So I am curious.
Yeah.
Story time from Debbie. By the way, we're speaking with certified financial planner Shane Stewart with DMBA out of Salt Lake City, Utah, and giving great advice of, when we're dating at our age, no matter what our age is, what are the flags that we need to be aware of so we don't fall in a trap of financial doom because we're dating a guy who's just a financial disaster. So my story time is all about that, job changing. What was the reason for the job change? You got to find that out. But my experience when dating one man, we were in a long-term relationship, and he had gotten away from at the time I didn't know what had happened. So he said he had quit a rather high-paying job at a very, very well-known employer, very established company. Just for moral values. He didn't appreciate the way the company was being run, which was surprising to me because I'm very familiar with this company as a journalist. And I thought they always ran a really tight ship. That's interesting. So he went from a job paying, a significant amount of money. It wasn't quite six figures, but this is years ago. And he went to a much lower paying job, making about $25,000 a year. And I later found out it probably wasn't because he left the company on his own.
They left him.
He didn't. They departed with him. I think if you're seeing a pattern of job jumping, you have to ask, if at least yourself, why is that happening? And then if you feel comfortable asking them, why is that happening? It could very well be it's because they keep getting fired from jobs. I think you have to look at that and think maybe there's a pattern or a problem with him.
For sure. I think it's one of the things that you can pick up on, and I like the word pattern. If there's a pattern of that, things happen, right? They might not agree at an employer, but if there's more than one, if there's two or more, you see a pattern there that you really have to pay attention.
But if you're going to leave a company based on moral and ethical values, or you come to some sort of disagreement at a point when you don't agree with their policy, you're generally not going to go from a job making $70,000 or $80,000 a year to barely scraping by at just under $25,000
that is a red
a
flag.
year.
Yep, that's a red flag that really it was that terrible where you were that you're taking a job that's making a third of what you were paying.
That you can hardly afford to live on that salary. So to me, that was so I think, Caitlyn, as you're looking at that and you're asking a question, are you doing it because you want to do it, or are you doing it because your security badge has been shut off and you've been escorted out by the security staff?
And I just had a thought when you were saying that a deeper communication on this kind of thing can really root out the truth. And I'll give you an example. If now, hindsight's 2020, right? If you could have said, really, they have bad ethics, morals. Tell me more. What was it exactly that made you make this change? And then and if they say none of your business, you can say, okay, duly noted. That's probably a red flag. And if they say, oh, well, here's what happened, and make up a lie, okay, follow that along to, okay, so then why did you take a job that is paying so much lower? What's your next move? Are you going to stay in that $25,000 job, or are you moving to a better one? And so I think really drilling down will you'll either get to the truth, or you'll root it out to where they get irritated you asking, and that's also the truth.
Well, I don't want to make it all sound like, gold digger Debbie over here. That's not what it's about. What it is about is if you are entering a relationship / partnership with somebody, you definitely want to know, do I have a partner here, or am I going to be dragging them kicking and screaming financially through life?
Absolutely.
Because that can become very, very draining.
Yeah. As a man, I can tell you I wouldn't take that as gold digger Debbie. I take that as a financial planner. I think that that's extremely important, because if you get together with that person, even marriage or whatever long-term relationship, it's going to be the both of you in the boat, so to speak, when it comes to finances. And so you really should vet them, I guess, if you will. That sounds a little crass, but you really should determine. Now, it may or may not be a deal breaker for you whether you continue that relationship, but at least you need to know what you're getting into.
It also just comes back to the willingness and ability to communicate, which is something
huge.
that a lot of guys I've had experience with, they just run from. And it's like it's on our shopping list, quote unquote, of what we're looking for. So I just think that's very important.
Good point.
Do you think that men have, in general, as a certified financial planner, Shane, do you see that men have a hard time discussing money, or are there some men out there that are just brilliant at it?
I think so. Well, there's all kinds, right? But I think there's something almost caveman-like in this situation. And what I mean by that is men, even up till today, still have in the back of their mind, you're the hunter, gatherer, you're the provider, you're the, and so when they're not doing well at that, rather than address it and get better education, better training, whatever, some just hide it, spend on credit cards, lie about it, etc. The ones with character do something about it and fix it.
It's a willingness to change. And I guess another thing to point out is, like, you can have little slip-ups or things that you're going through. I think I'm very sympathetic in that way because I have it and I've witnessed it. But it's about how long you're going to be figuring it out, instead of just like, okay, I am figuring out, but how long and when are you actually going to make the change? I think is just a question to ask yourself of the relationship that you're in. And I think that one other thing that has come to mind about just like spending habits is looking at how they're spending, even like just on a weekend. Like, are they blowing all of their money at the bar, for example, or are you saving your money as you're spending this? Is it all play? And we deserve play. Yeah. I'm not saying we don't deserve play, but does it align with your values on how they're spending their money?
That's a good insight. You can, spending patterns, what I would refer to before, is really what you're just talking about. Is it all play? Yeah. Is it all? Do they ever talk about, I have a 401k at work, or something like that, something boring? If you hear them talk about some of those boring kinds of things, that's a good sign. If it's all play and you see every bit of money that they spend go out the door for play, that could be a red flag as well.
They're not doing anything that's going to bring growth.
Caitlyn, have you been in a situation where you see a guy, or you met a guy, or you've been with a guy, or maybe you even have friends who are with guys who have this pattern of problems with money, and then you wonder, when is the right time to just part ways and cut it off? Have you?
I've
had that?
Witnessed. I mean, yes and no. I think I've witnessed it among my friends as well. So that's just something about, are you taking care of them, like, and paying their phone bill or something like that? I've never been in that direct situation, but yes, I have noticed pattern. But I'm also 29, so that's kind of why I asked that first question. Like, how do you analyze it, and where does it go from there? But yeah, I do, and it concerns me. But I'm also like, they're 27 years old, so it's just hard to know.
I think you can keep making excuses for that, though, and I worry about that.
I'm 29 years old, and
you're
I'm
extremely responsible, and you've been working really hard for a number of years, and you're an amazing producer. I know, because I see you in action every single day. You're saving money, you're cutting corners where you can, and cutting expenses. So if Caitlyn gets into a relationship like this, where she notices that the man isn't matching her energy when it comes to finance, when is the right time to cut it off? Because I look at it this way: her situation in her 20s is going to be a lot different than my situation in my late 50s, because I don't have as much runway, as I've said. Right. To retirement. I don't, and I can't afford a massive financial mistake, and that might include getting into a relationship with a guy who's multiple bankruptcies, he owes money to the IRS, and we can talk about more of that next for me. But for Caitlyn and people her age, when is the right time to just run?
Yeah, I think that you, Caitlyn, have the opportunity, I guess, if you will, to give a little runway for someone. You're right, 27, 29 years old. Give them a little bit of runway there to work things out, However, if you've been if that relationship is getting more serious, I would say, and you're contemplating, do I cut this off or not? It's probably a good idea to sit down and say, I'd like to talk about finances with you.
Yeah.
A great, boring subject. But however, if it's getting serious and you're trying to make that decision, do we go further or not because of this issue? Sit down and have a heart-to-heart about finances and just say, hey, what's your philosophy on this? What are your, and if you're getting a bad vibe even, that they're either lying or just not wanting to talk about it, that's one thing. If they say, yeah, I've known you a while and you appear to have it together. I'd like to be more like that. Can you show me how to do that? Or you could offer to show them how to save, how to do better in their expenditures. It depends on their interest in that topic of whether you cut it off or not. Yeah. Because if they say, look, I don't want to talk about that. It's no fun. The play guy, right? The guy who's playing all the time. It's no fun to talk about that. It's boring. You probably just gave you permission to cut that relationship off.
So if they're not willing to even have the conversation, you already know your answer.
Exactly.
Right there.
But you can do that in a really loving way. If you're in a serious relationship, you can say, hey, look, I think we have something good going here, but I have a concern. And it's financial. Can we talk about that? That's fair. That's really fair in a more long-term relationship, and I think you should. I think that's the test right there.
I think money is the root of all evils when it comes to uprooting relationships.
I
think if you're not on the same page, and one partner or the other is just off playing with money and blowing money, and the other one's trying to save money, you're on this hamster wheel. You're just trying to keep up all the time, and somebody just going to feel absolutely burned.
Absolutely. In fact, the blame game starts being played. You didn't do this, you did that, and it really destroys a relationship.
Straight ahead, Shane. Stay put, because I do want to pick your brain about dating at my age.
Right. In your early 30s.
In my early 30s, right? 29 again, just like Caitlyn. No, I think it is definitely a different landscape out here in dating land for 50-something-year-olds and 60-something-year-olds. We can't afford to make any blunders right now. We've worked 40 years to get to this point. So I want to bounce some scenarios that I've had in my dating life off of you and ask you which ones are absolute deal breakers. For example, should I sign on the dotted line for a new car with the guy I'm dating? Or what about a house? Or what about a boat? And what about mixing, bank accounts? There's lots of questions to explore. And like I said, trust me, I've got a story for everyone. Next.
Welcome back to Dating at Her Age. Before we get to Deb's questions about financial advice at her age, I have one follow-up question for Shane Stewart, certified financial planner with DMBA. Do you ever see girls taking advantage of men financially? Because I know this exists, and I want to make sure that we address that it can happen.
Sure, absolutely. It's possible. It's probably not as frequent just because, in my opinion, the ladies are a little sharper about this, especially you're in their 20s and 30s. However, I did have an experience in my 20s, young guy dating someone, and she said, let's go test drive cars. That would be fun. I've always had my eye on this car. And
it does sound fun.
Yeah, and it's
also
fun,
sounds like a setup to me, but go ahead.
Yeah, see, you're smarter than I am, Debbie. I didn't see the setup.
I'm also older than you are, Shane.
I was in my 20s, right? I live and learn. Now I know it's a setup. But she said, there's this car I've always loved. Let's go drive it. The next thing I knew, we were sitting in front of a salesman with paperwork. And I thought, what happened here? And he said, yeah, so you're the co-signer. And I said, whoa, no. No. And frankly, I have to admit something. Although, 56-year-old me knows that's the wrong thing to do, 20-something-year-old me went, well, we like each other, and I think this is going somewhere. Why don't I?
Wait.
I had that thought. I had the thought that I would sign, and then I just came to my senses and went, no, can't do it. Can't do it. And then only within a matter of weeks, that relationship unraveled.
Yeah.
And I went, oh, okay, there you go.
That's a great lesson for Caitlyn.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do that, but it's also people are young, they're naive, they don't think about how long that's going to be with them as well. You just think, I can help them out right now. Things are good. Things are always going to be good.
Absolutely.
No.
So I went from not being able to commit to a relationship to committing to a car loan. How does that work?
How'd you get out of it?
It can happen.
How'd you get out of it?
The relationship or the
both? What line did you use? Did you stand up and run out the door?
Yeah, I ran out screaming. No, at the car lot, I just said no. We're just playing. This is just we came to test run a car. She may say she wants to buy it, but there's no way I'm co-signing on this loan, right? And when we ended it and left. In the relationship, however, that was a red flag for me. So in the relationship, I started paying attention to signals that made me realize, this person's after something different than just the relationship. It's about money. It's about things. And we had a conversation. I said, I think we're headed in a different direction of what we want out of a relationship. And she said, I agree. And I went, oh, good. Then I'm out.
You're not going to pay her bills.
That's right. Yeah.
And the reason I feel like that is a great learning lesson for all of us. And I said, Caitlyn, is because you are such a good soul, Caitlyn. I would
help
worry.
Someone, honestly.
Yeah. You would.
I would help someone.
I hope you would come to me and ask me, and I would be able to run over to the car lot and pull you away from that. Because
just get Aunt Debbie on the case and
totally.
Fine.
I mean, I would absolutely drive in the middle of the night to save you from something like that, because once you sign on the dotted line, you're stuck.
That's right.
And you don't even know if they're going to make the payment.
That's right. It's likely you'll be making the payment. That was their whole goal.
That also makes me think. I have friends who are unmarried, which, most of them have been together for a long time, but I've also seen the situation in people who have not been together for a long time where they actually buy a house together. And it's concerning. But you're signing a very long loan in that case, so you should hope that there is going to be a long-term thing there.
Yeah, well, again, that amazes me that we can make we can't commit to the relationship, but we can commit to a mortgage together.
A guy friend say that it seemed less scary than getting married.
Wow.
And then for some reason, that memory just came up, and I don't understand it, but I do at the same time.
What is the pitfall? I mean, I've owned a few homes, and the only home I owned with my partner was my husband, and we owned a few homes together, and I've owned a couple of homes on my own. I would never be in a dating relationship. Even my best friend in the whole world would I co-sign on a mortgage with. That is just a hard and fast rule for me, and I'd be too afraid of all of the what ifs. I'm always a what ifer. What is the worst case scenario? And the worst case scenario is, first of all, what if something horrific happens to them and they pass away? And I've got this, and homes today are $1 million, $600,000. I've got this massive mortgage. The other thing is what if he splits it? What if he splits on me? Like he breaks up with me?
How do you handle that? Yeah.
Well, I think you have rights when you have a mortgage and you're married, but you don't enjoy those same rights if you are, single.
That's right. And in fact, you just hit a very significant estate planning issue right there of joint ownership. As a financial planner, I discourage joint ownership with anyone but your spouse because of those legal protections. And I'll give you not a dating story, but a prison story. There was an instance where
it's getting good. It is getting good. We're going into cell block dating to prison right now with Shane Stewart. What do you know about prison, Shane?
Here we go.
I don't know.
There's a couple who wanted to put a child on as joint owner of their assets. And they thought that was an estate planning way that when they die, son still owns it, off he goes. Son goes to prison and starts managing his parents' affairs from prison and spending all their money, liquidating all their assets. And they couldn't do anything about it because he's a joint owner. That's an extreme case of showing how joint ownership opens up not just what you own jointly, but also if that person is in prison or being sued for bankruptcy or anything, or filing for bankruptcy or anything like that, you, the joint owner, are also attached, not just for the assets that you own jointly, but a savvy attorney can go after your other assets because they assume if you're close enough to be joint owners, well, then you must be close enough for me to also go after your assets. So you just hit on a very key subject there. joint ownership should be, I almost, as I told you, made that mistake of, as a 20-something-year-old co-sign on a loan. Well, we have joint ownership. Well, fortunately, I owned nothing besides potentially that car at the time.
Or the liability.
Exactly.
What if happens if she races that car out of the car lot and runs over somebody?
Absolutely. You're now tied at the hip when it comes to all things financial.
See, I live in what if worst case scenario all the time. I just do. I was a news reporter for forever, and I've seen it all. I really have. You interview people, and you're like, oh my goodness, I got to write this down on a never do this list because I'm learning through the people I've been interviewing all these years. Which brings me to some of my stories that I've had in my 50s, dating after divorce. I've really learned some hard lessons about money. And often it comes in the form of, I'm going to have to pick up this tab, or I'm going to pay for this. But also dating, let's just start here. I've got lots of questions, and one of which is when you move in together, should you get him to sign a lease? And I'll talk to you more about that in a moment. And I specifically say him because they're going to be, they were moving in my house, not they. I mean, not all of the guys, like one guy, but I'm saying maybe, he's gone now, but maybe there might be another guy down the road. So let's start with the idea of dating somebody who's flat broke, been through bankruptcy. Yes, I told you that I live in reality. These are my realities. And guys in their 50s, there's a lot who struggle with money. There's a lot who don't, but I seem to pick up the ones that struggle with money. So dating somebody who has a history of bankruptcy, what kind of besides maybe they're just obviously really bad with money, what kinds of red flags does that throw up for you as a certified financial planner, Shane?
Well, unlike what we talked about with Caitlyn, where they're in their 20s and they're learning, and they're growing and they have a longer runway to fix things and get better. Someone in their 50s who has problems with money, they're still acting like a child financially, but they're an adult. And that, no offense to Caitlyn, you're not a child. But what I mean is,
I am a child.
But what I mean is learning those kinds of things. It is a big red flag for any kind of financial problem is a red flag for me in their 50s. It may not be a deal breaker. You got to dive a little deeper like we've talked about, but it is a big red flag if someone in their 50s has not managed money well, has not done a lot. So you really have to dive a little deeper and find out more about the situation. If there was a bankruptcy, let's say as an example, and then you learned, the partner in that business that person owned made off with all their money, just took everything and ran, and the police are searching for them now, or they're in prison or whatever. That's a little different than, I've always worked. I've always been underemployed. I've always tried to do things and they failed. I've always, if there's a pattern of those kind of things, that becomes more of a deal breaker. But in their 50s, it is really difficult. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of them out there that have not done well financially. And frankly, they're happy to partner with someone who is doing it right.
The thing about all of the women my age who have spent so many years sacrificing to save money for retirement, and now they've ended up in divorce, and hopefully they got half. I mean, it just depends on the divorce circumstances, and there's all kinds of different scenarios, so it's impossible to fully analyze every single one of them. But I think about getting together with a guy who, for example, I've been saving from a very early age when I got my very first job in television news for retirement. And I've had some setbacks. I had a divorce, it's always a financial setback, right? It's half.
Yep. Nobody wins
it's a 50% financial setback.
Right.
The stock market in the 2008 crashes. You talk about the housing market, which led to the crashes. So houses are losing value, like our lakes are losing water, So terrible setbacks. Recover. And remember how much anxiety I felt, and keep saving and saving and saving. Yeah. And one day, Shane, I'm going to be able to retire. Right. And then I meet a guy, and I've had more than one guy tell me, even on the first date, can I marry you for your retirement? Can I marry you for, one guy said, can I marry you for your health insurance? Because I got a whole group of ducklings back at the house who need insurance, his kids. Yeah. And then another guy who hadn't really done anything toward retirement. Is this a scenario where I should just like make what is it called, an Irish exit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Irish goodbye.
I get up to use the bathroom at the restaurant, at the coffee shop, and I'm like, I just keep going. I flag an Uber 3 blocks over.
Leave. I mean, maybe I'd finish the day, but I'd be like, politely,
I can't do that. I just can't do that, right? I'm not crazy. I can't afford his to take on his bad money habits.
I'm shocked and amazed it was on the first date.
Oh no.
I mean,
that just shows
maybe in their
intention
50s.
of what they're wanting.
Yeah. At least you got that up front, right?
A 100% true example of what has happened to me. And I think it also goes to the desperation of men who are in their later years.
Yep. Yeah. They have no time to waste.
They haven't had a plan.
They need to get right to the point.
They haven't had a plan. Yeah. So I suddenly become plan A. Yeah. Well, I do eventually would love to be able to share my life with somebody,
including your finances, if it were in the right,
absolutely,
if it were in the right attitude, right?
Yeah, but women who are, at this point in our lives, we should be running from that, right? We should be wearing our running shoes to the coffee shop in case we have to make the dash to get away.
Even an Irish exit, I think, would be fine because
it would be too slow.
Yeah.
I think you should blast myself out of a howitzer. Out of that scenario.
You should literally run because.
Excuse me.
Yeah, you should really get out of there. I mean, that's just and. Thank goodness they gave you that up front, right? You didn't have to waste time on building a relationship.
For that.
Caitlyn, do you agree? I agree with Shane 100% on that.
No, that's very respectful because I think that my concern is I don't know if the 30-year-old, 35-year-old that I'm talking to is going to turn into the 50-year-old that's just doing that. Because like I said, we're all figuring it out, and I have a lot of sympathy for people my age, but I don't know. Yeah, respect for saying it up front.
Yeah.
Shane, by the way, we're speaking to Shane Stewart. He's a certified financial planner with DMBA in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I'm so happy that we're having you on the show to talk about finances. Because I think women, sometimes we just want to give men a pass or hope they improve or hope that we can share
change him.
We can share our secret recipe, which brings me to the point that Caitlyn brought up. Like, what happens if he turns into my 29-year-old guy turns into Debbie's 55-year-old guy, years down the road? Can women change men financially?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
That's a no.
I
that sounds like
so.
A no.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you would. I think that there's a slight chance at Caitlyn's age. Caitlyn, at your age, you've got it together. Obviously, as Debbie mentioned. Yeah, well,
I'm trying my best.
More than the average person, right?
I'm trying.
Exactly.
But I have
and
debt.
if you had a relationship with someone who said, they were genuine and said, I've always struggled a little bit with money. My relationship with money is a little different. What do you do, Caitlyn? And started learning from that and started changing their ways. That's not that you tried to change them. It's just that they were willing to, they had that want to
that's actually
change,
what I was going to kind of bring up is I think that some people may just lack guidance.
That's it.
And they may not have gotten it from their parents or anything like that. And that's why I have so much sympathy because every situation's so different. You've got the users and abusers, and then you've just got the ones who are lost. So
one thing I really loved and appreciated about my ex-husband, and we are friends, and I have a lot of respect for all of he's accomplished. When we first got married, I think it's before we got married, I looked at his pay stub. This is when he still got pay stub. It's in the 90s. I looked at his pay stub and I thought, you're not putting any money in your 401k. He was a police officer, so he had an additional opportunity to save into a 457, like that pre-taxed savings. So he had two paths that, every police officer and police officer's a significant other will be familiar with a 457.
And he wasn't utilizing it.
He really wasn't. And I said, I know what you're doing Monday morning, sweetheart. You're going down to the main office there and you're bumping that up to 10%. And I think at first he might have thought, well, okay, 10% divided by 2. I'll put, no, that's 10% in each account. So he started it saving into his 401k and 457 just months before we got married. We had a short engagement, 6 months. And he really followed my lead on that. And I had been saving for a number of years by then, and through my television news jobs. And I really appreciated that he said, oh, you know, I that is something I'm going to go do. And by golly, he did it. Mm. And that makes all of the difference. And I'll tell you where that got us 25 or 30 years later.
Yeah.
A lot.
Good.
Mm-hmm. That's where it got us. It got us a lot.
I think that it's just about like, I am more than willing to help, not even help like, hey, tell you exactly what to do, but inspire maybe is the word. Yeah. If you're willing to listen and accept it. Because that's if you're just going to be like a brick wall where you don't reciprocate that or listen to what I'm saying or kind of take anything to improve yourself and grow your knowledge on all of this. Because if you just don't know, it's okay. But you just
you have to want to be on the same page as the partner.
The desire. The desire is huge.
Yeah.
I think that you hit it also on the head that we think that we can change someone. We can't. They have to have the desire to do so. And what you said, Caitlyn, is are they willing to have some feedback? Are they willing to say, like your husband, your ex said, okay, let's do that. Let's go ahead and do that. My wife is a nurse. And one day she said to me, do you understand how much I'm putting in my 401k? Meaning, I didn't know I was putting that much in my 401k. And I said, yes, I did it. Remember, you gave me the password. And she said, should I be doing that? I want to spend that now. And I said, I know you do, but future self is going to thank you. And we have the kind of relationship where she just said, okay, I trust you to do that. I trust you to do that. That's the difference.
It just shows
it's the relationship.
Respecting your partner as well.
Yep.
Shane, we've talked so much about the pitfalls of signing on the dotted line with somebody you're not married to. And and this is something I could be faced with as Caitlyn could be as single women. Let's in a moment I want to talk about, they're moving in. Yeah. Do I get them to sign a lease agreement? And I've got a very strong feeling about this. And of course, an example, another Debbie Downer moment in the dating world. But it's not unusual for people of my age to have not, maybe it is, maybe unusual is not the right word. It's not unheard of for people my age to decide, they don't have enough money to pay their taxes. And so now we've got, the IRS coming after them. Maybe the state maybe they haven't paid property taxes, if they own a home or whatever, the state's coming after them, the county's coming after them, and the IRS. Like, you got all levels of government on the march to collect. First of all, I think that is, again, another red flag because it shows a pattern. I'm not somebody who's going to run from my taxes. I file them every year. I pay for them. And if I didn't have the money, I would go get a second and third job to pay because I just don't want that hanging over my head. Yeah. But my worry is, let's say the government is owed a significant amount of money. And sometimes it's hard to figure that out because a lot of those records might be private, right? Yeah. I mean, you might not know if the IRS is breathing down their neck. So let's say I'm at that car lot with my now boyfriend. And I'm in Shane's 29-year-old shoes, and I'm sitting down, and they're tricking me into helping them get into their next new car. And I succumb because nice Debbie is like, oh, I'm going to be like Caitlyn in this moment and feel really bad. They need my help, and I'm such a good person, and I want to be their angel, and I want them
change them
and
later.
I want them to love me as much as they love, I love them, and all the other things, and I sign.
Yeah.
What does that put me on the hook for if the IRS finds out that I'm signed on the dotted line with them on a car? And maybe I pay the cash. I mean, maybe pay cash or I give them the down payment or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. If they're in trouble with the IRS, you could be as well. Meaning if they have trouble paying their taxes, well, the IRS will certainly be interested that you own something jointly, and they'll simply
opens the door.
It opens the door. It opens the door for the IRS to, or any other governmental agency to start scrutinizing your finances and maybe even trying to get into those finances. Yeah.
So don't sign anything ever with somebody else.
Yeah,
unless you've had a conversation.
You're gambling.
Yeah. They're really.
I would have to know somebody for even 3+ years if I'm not married to them. But I don't think I would even want to if I wasn't married.
Yeah, I think that the commitment of marriage is, and I'm keeping it totally financial. But the commitment to marry, it's how the government views it is if you're committed to marriage, you're committed to have joint finances. And if you're not married, doing that commitment to joint finances doesn't have the governmental protections that being married does. It's just the way it is. It doesn't have to do with should you get married or not. It has to do with the financial situation. And I think you're right, Caitlyn, don't sign anything ever that's going to give you joint ownership with anybody other than a spouse that you're married to.
That's rule one with finances and dating. And in a future episode, Caitlyn and I are going to walk through all of my websites, my go-to websites that I used to do DIY background checks.
Huh.
These are news reporter Debbie websites that I've used over the years as an investigative reporter to find out, a financial situation that people are in that I'm doing stories on, for a number of reasons, that we have to vet people or we have to find out if they're in trouble with the law, or we have to find out if they've had, I did a story years ago on a guy who was running a debt relief company. Like, he was helping people get out of debt. And I had to dig into bankruptcy records to find out he'd had a few bankruptcies of his own, and that's why his company was going down in flames.
Right.
And so I do have a lot of experience with that. I've been promising Caitlyn that I would walk her through.
I want to know.
Yeah.
I want to know how to
Why not?
So it's just and I use it very judiciously.
Sure.
I don't run around gathering up information on people. But if I'm going to get into a relationship with somebody and they're throwing up some red flags, I want to use news reporter Debbie skills to keep, my personal life walled off from anybody that's going to be dragging me into a financial hellhole.
I think that's fair. I think it's actually wise to do so. Someone might say, oh, well, that seems a little creepy to stalk them that way. That's usually the guilty who will say that, meaning they have something to hide. And so I think it's a great idea.
People can use money to hold power over you. So if you get tied up in that situation, they can hold that over you. But if you know what kind of person they are, they could be the kind of person that can hold that over you.
Yeah.
So that's actually a bigger concern for me.
It's a character thing.
Great question.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Shane?
Well, I think the way you spend and the way you manage your finances has to do with your character. So I agree. I think if you go find out about their character, it will really tell you a lot of things, including their financial situation. And you probably vetted me before you let me on this episode.
Well, you don't want to also, at least as a woman, I don't want to get into a relationship where it's about money and power of money and being. I think you bring up an excellent point,
that's why
Caitlyn.
I always I advocate to just take care of yourself. I think you should be able to rely on somebody, to be the other half to help you with finances. But I'm always team take care of myself.
I wonder too
if
you will kind of feel like I do, and I've spent so many years, even from basically the age of 18 on, financially taking care of myself. And I was married for a number of years too, and we were, in joint bank accounts and everything. But I have spent so much of that time, so I'm almost conditioned that I don't want to have to rely on a man, and I don't want to have to have money be used against me, and I just don't want that to be, just a big old speed bump in the relationship.
Yeah. I think that you're both doing something that is really admirable, because if that man's a little slow in coming along, you're good. But more importantly, you're exhibiting the behavior that you're looking for in a man. And when you meet that guy who's doing what you're doing and taking care of themselves, your situation, even financially, will be so much more powerful than if you're the weak link in the relationship. So I think what you're doing is prudent, because what if they're a little slow in coming along? But two, you meet the guy who's doing the same thing. What a powerful relationship that will be, including financially.
Okay. Final Debbie Downer moment. Maybe you've been dating 6 months or a year. I think everybody has their own timeline of when they talk about maybe moving in together outside of marriage. I know it's a tough subject for a lot of people to talk about, but a lot of folks, a lot of couples, especially my age, are doing that. They're moving in together before they get married. Do you sign a lease agreement? What do you think? As a certified financial planner, I have my own hot take on this, Shane.
Well, it is also fraught with pitfalls, just because, like joint ownership, it ties you together with financial things. I know it's difficult for people to afford a home right now, depending on their income, that kind of thing. In fact, I know of situations where 3 people are on the lease, so they all band together and found a place to lease, that kind of thing. So I would say if you can avoid it, avoid it. And the reason being
avoid
is because
moving in together.
Avoid sharing the lease together.
Okay.
Meaning if one person owns the place or could be the one on the lease, sure. If you want to charge them rent, so to speak, but have sole control of the lease, I've seen better success in that scenario where one person is on the lease and other pays them rent rather than two people on the lease if they're not married. I've seen better success.
And as a homeowner, I've had a man move in. So I was a homeowner and he moved in, and I wanted to get a lease agreement signed because I have been a landlord in other scenarios. We had homes and condos and rented them out. And so I know the value of having a lease agreement. It just spells everything out legally. Yeah. It lets you know when the lease is up. And then if they don't pay rent or something like that, they can be evicted. It's a horrible word, right? Sure. But let's face it, if you're getting into a relationship and you love each other and then one of the partners stops supplementing the income with their income, and they decide they're not going to pay towards the mortgage, and they're not going to pay for any groceries, and they suddenly become this massive sack of potatoes on the sofa
that you need to get rid of and legally can't. Right?
You legally can't. Yeah. And I think this is something that needs to be considered before you toss out the question and say, how about if we move in together? Does that sound good? Yeah. And by Monday morning, the moving van's showing up.
Right.
Because it's really hard to get somebody out of your home if you don't have any legal standing. Now, I managed to work my way through it because I'd had my experience as a landlord in the past. I knew what to do. But this gets really messy.
Yeah. And in that case, it may sound like I'm reversing my position on it, but
I think it's case by case, though, Shane.
Well, for sure. But I also think the way you explain that it's more of a rental agreement that you control. I love it. I love that idea of something where if you're either together on the lease or you're controlling the lease, you have the option to kick them out if they're not pulling their share.
It sounds all kinds of horrible.
I like that idea because then you have control. It's really more about control of the situation and where you're not bound to help them even if they're a slug, so to speak.
Well, I've seen these situations go south, and it's maybe not even on the lease part of it, but just moving in with someone too fast and just all the pitfalls it can cause. I think it compromises the relationship early on. I think you need to have your space, like when you're just dating. And I always see when people are moving in after, being together for 4 months, 5 months or whatever, I'm just like, I don't know if I see that lasting for a long time, and then it just blows up in their face.
Yeah.
It always sounds lovely.
Yeah. Well, and he made a point, it's expensive out there. So I actually see it happen a lot.
It can happen.
It could be a financial reason to do it. It could be that it does sound like a great idea. And for many, many couples, it may very well be. I just also look at it as when you're dating somebody, there's also this financial entanglement, and you can put yourself at financial risk. And the only reason I know that is because I've lived through it.
Yeah.
So I've made all these mistakes.
Yeah.
And now I have all the experiences. Shane Stewart, this fabulous conversation. Thank you so much. Shane Stewart,
thanks for having me.
Certified financial planner with DMBA. Caitlyn, I think we learned a lot.
Don't sign anything ever. then take some time to get to know the people.
Yeah.
That's my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, thanks, Shane.
Yep.
It's time for our Dater Hater segment.
Dater Hater.
And Deb has the Dater Hater comment. What are we talking about today?
Too many ex-wives.
Oh.
Concern that men, at least in my age group, in their late 50s, have had too many divorces. And this comes from people on social media who are saying, after 2 divorces, that feels like too many. Does that make us a dater hater if we won't date somebody or can keep dating somebody who has more than 2 divorces? I mean, what's your threshold at 29?
1 is acceptable. I can see how that can happen. You get married young, you live your life, you realize it's not meant to be. I'm 29 years old, so just feel like that makes sense in that window. A lot of people get married at early 20s. 2 would be pushing it for me because I just am like, I don't know. Yeah. What have you been doing? Because I don't. Yeah. 2 is a lot.
I had this scenario kind of in my face one night over dinner when I was on a first date with a man. And he started out with the appetizers arriving and talking about 2 ex-wives. And by the time dessert had arrived, it was up to 3 ex-wives. So I went into the night thinking he'd been married and divorced twice. And by the end of the night, he has
swooped it in
3 severed marriages. Now, there's a couple of things that are going on in my mind with this. First, I think men should be transparent. When you're on the first date and you're getting to know somebody, don't try to minimize the number of times you've been to the altar. Just tell me like it is. Because I feel like 3 ex-wives kind of changes the scenario for me, and I'm going to explain why. That's a lot of extra people in a relationship. And you may say, oh, well, we all get along quite well. Well, now I'm inserting myself, and now there's 3 ex-wives and a new girlfriend. How do family gatherings look?
Yeah, are they still involved? Some people may, but if you have kids, they're definitely still involved.
They're still involved, and does everybody get along at all times? And does that start to weigh on our relationship?
Too many cooks in the kitchen. That's how I see it.
So I draw the line at 2 ex-wives, and I think marriages count even if they're for 6 weeks or for 6 years.
Yeah. Marriage is so serious that it surprises me that people just do it out of nowhere. It's a legal commitment. So yeah. And whatever, people make mistakes, I guess. But that is, a quick Vegas trip, marriage, whatever, that counts.
I saw this comment on one of my TikTok posts, and she says that her ex has 6 ex-wives. 6 ex-wives.
That's a lot. I don't even know how you do that in a lifetime.
Well, and also, in addition to being an emotional drain, divorce is a financial drain.
Yeah.
The cost of if you go through attorneys alone it can be expensive. Then dividing up your assets is that feels like a lot of legal minutia in somebody's life. I'd take a hard pass on that. I'm sticking to the 2 ex-wives. That's my boundary. We'll see if that plays out the next time I get a date, if I get a date.
Yeah. And the financial thing is something I don't even think about firsthand, is because I'm 29. So I'm like, whatever, you get a divorce. I don't realize that's a lot that comes with it. So.
And the questions that I would be asking at my age are, is he paying alimony? Is he paying alimony again? Is he paying alimony again? What does
Child
that look like
too.
financially? Yeah.
Yeah. That is a heavy lift, especially if you've got 6.
I don't know if that makes me a dater hater, but 2 ex-wives, that's my limit. That's where I'm drawing the line.
My limit's 1 right now. I think I'd run away if there were 2.
Dater, hater.
You can join the conversation. We want to hear your bad dating stories. I want you to spill the tea. Give us a call at our voicemail line. It's 801-575-5599, and we may just feature it on the show.
That's right. You may hear your dating horror story on our podcast. And by the way, you can subscribe now at kslpodcast.com or find us at kslnewsradio.com.
Next week on Dating at Her Age, we've got the skinny on situationships, which unfortunately I have a lot of experience in. I'll share some of my scary situationship stories along with ways to identify if you're in a situationship and what you can do to get out of one. I feel like if Taylor Swift can write a song about the smallest man who ever lived, I can share a story or two about experiences that kind of sort of hurt my feelings. That's next time on Dating at Her Age.